ring the alarm. I've been through this too long, but I'll be damned. She's gonna be rocking VVS stones, and no, I'm not feeling it. Essentially, she's gonna profit everything I taught, and so I can't let you go. That's essentially what happens in a nutshell. Blair goes just full Blair. Hello, everyone. This is Alex.
And this is Em.
Welcome to the latest episode of The Good, the Bad, the Basic.
This is the podcast for nostalgic Gen X and millennials and binge watchers of all ages.
On this podcast, we'll be discussing what we love, what we hate, and what was just a bit problematic about the TV and movies that we're addicted to.
And do a little bit of rewriting where necessary.
On today's episode, we'll be finishing our review of Gossip Girl, focusing on the second half of the series.
As mentioned last week, Gossip Girl wasn't the strongest series in myriad ways, but it lasted for 6 seasons and well over 100 episodes. So what was the magic formula?
And how did a series about such self-absorbed, flighty, and grossly wealthy people with mediocre writing do so well for so long? Stay tuned.
All right. So we left off at our recap of season 3. So let's jump into season 4. Season 4 sees more of the very toxic relationship between Chuck and Blair. A relationship that really shouldn't have been a thing, but becomes a thing. And then in the season, Blair finds an escape hatch, basically, in the form of Prince Louis Grimaldi, a prince who she becomes engaged and later on married to. And, you know, we low-key want this to work for Blair, despite a few red flags in that relationship, simply because nothing he's doing could ever surpass what Chuck has already done to her. But the show very much codes Louis later on as an adversary, as an antagonist to Blair, because, you know, they want her to end up with Chuck. So they use a lot of the plot devices that are used on TVD and the originals. They put on the bad guy music. They frame the scenes in such a way that we don't root for Louis, and instead we root for her to end up with this incredibly toxic person, Chuck.
Right. So at the beginning of season 4, we kick it off like the first 2 episodes are in Paris, which shout out. I don't know how in season 4 I don't know how those shows creators convinced the CW to give them all that money to go to Paris, but somehow that happened. But I think it's worth it. It feels good. It's definitely, like, I think it's good to sort of get that change up in the scenery, to be quite honest. It's really nice. And then they bring up that they're going to college again, like sophomore year, and I don't know why, because, like, they forget, like, I think the show forgets that all of these people are in college by, I think, the 4th episode. They don't even care anymore. But in the first 2 episodes, we're introduced to Louis Grimaldi. He's supposed to be like the Prince of Monaco, and Blair's into it because, you know, she's Blair and that's like her whole like big thing. And for the most part, like, he's fine. He's very fine. He's very sweet. Emma is right, though. By the sort of, I think, later half of season 4 into season 5, they do like there's a character assassination that happens via Louis, because what we do we don't learn a lot of his character, but what we do learn, he's just like a pretty decent guy. He's not really like mean in any sort of way. A lot of things that should be red flags for him, he sort of just kind of goes with. And a lot of things that he shouldn't put up with from Blair, he does. Specifically thinking to, I think the season 4 finale, which, the season 4 finale is they're like Louis and Blair get engaged and she says yes. And her and Chuck, and then she cheats on him. And then Blair cheats on Louis with Chuck, like has sex with Chuck. And, Chuck feels very, like he's won in that sort of classic Chuck way. And when he sort of goes up to the place where Louis is supposed to meet Blair, before Blair comes up herself to tell Louis that she's going to call off the engagement, Chuck sees him there and he's like, why are you waiting here? And the party's almost over and Louis is sort of sitting there and he questions him like, what do you mean, why am I here? Like, Blair said she was coming, so I'm waiting. Like, he goes, but you're even in front of all your family and your friends and all these people. He's like, listen. And Louis is like, listen, I trust Blair to make the right decision for us and for herself. Like, he's like, she's scared. She's never been happy. She doesn't know what that's like to be happy. So I get it. But she's going to do the right thing in the end, which is a really big thing. And then Chuck... It's
certainly a level of trust that Chuck has never shown in her.
Right. It's something he's never shown in her. It's something... It shows, like, I think a belief in her that, like, Chuck has never had for her. So it's... And this will be, like, a hallmark of, like... And that sort of trust, or, like, really trusting Blair to know her own mind, and despite, who she is, because Blair is all, like... I think Blair is, like, a lot like Seth Cohen in that the strength of Blair is... the strength of Blair, and I think why we root for Blair, is not necessarily because of how the character is written, but because, like, just the strength of Leighton Meester as an actress is, like, I think unmatched on the show. But this will also, like, sort of come into that Dan Blair storyline. I think the reason why, like, both of them end up having a trust and a belief in Blair, Dan even more so, because they just trust her to be herself and really trust, like, the innate goodness in her, which I think is significant.
Right. And, when I think about Chuck and Blair, it's really, really hard not to see that as, on Blair's part, some type of addiction, right? Like, Chuck treats her like trash, and then we make excuses for him. Well, we're expect to make excuses for him because Chuck had a bad childhood. Chuck's daddy was mean to him, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? He's not the only person in that relationship that had a neglectful or an abusive parent or who lacked love in their household growing up. Get the fuck over it.
Right. I mean, even like on the show, like, I mean, Serena is like, that's Lily's parenting, like, right? Like, and it's consistently reinforced throughout the show. I mean, since season 1, that, like, Lily was an extremely neglectful parent, sort of leaving her, like, 10-year-old and 6-year-old, in, like, a 10-year-old Serena and 6-year-old Eric, just leaving them in New York City whenever she sort of fell in love or whatever for days on end.
Well, I don't want to bring Serena into it because she's also a fucked up character, but I'm talking specifically about Nate and Chuck and Blair. Blair has a, mother who puts her down, a mother who's emotionally distant, a father who checked out on her. She could use the same excuses that Chuck uses to be horrible to him, but she doesn't. It's as if we're supposed to cater to his bad childhood, but not to hers. In essence, putting Blair in that, what you called it before when we reviewed the originals, that kind of handmaiden role to these really bad men. And she really has no reason to stay with Chuck other than that. Like, she's just addicted to the drama.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. And Blair has Blair has her own issues and her own sort of a lot of her own hang-ups and things that I think she's trying to work through. And her sort of control she's trying to exert. And it doesn't, essentially the relationship doesn't help anything. It just doesn't help her. It's not formative for her in any real way. She'd be better off without it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm by no means, you guys, trying to say that Blair is a perfect person. She does have a lot of insecurities and hang-ups, like Alex mentioned. But I'm talking specifically about the way that she treats Chuck versus the way that Chuck treats her. Last season, this dude literally tried to sell her for a hotel. It's things like that are not just foibles and quirks of a personality. It's just indicative of a really shitty person that doesn't respect you, doesn't respect your autonomy, and deeply doesn't care about you. I think Blair's addicted to Chuck and the drama of Chuck, and maybe Chuck can lay pipe like that. Maybe Chuck is really fucking fantastic in bed. I don't know. But I think Chuck is addicted to toying with her, fucking with somebody, and seeing how far he can push them before they don't love him anymore. In a lot of ways, he's like his father, Bart Bass, in that fashion.
Right. So at least, I guess in that, the characterization is smart and consistent. So then you sort of have, in this early half of season 4, I had completely forgotten about it. The whole thing is they find Chuck in Paris, and Chuck was sort of about to, because he had been, I think, in Amsterdam previously and was mugged and left for dead. And he's found by this sex worker with a heart of gold, Eva, and he brings her back to New York because he has responsibilities in New York. He has a lot of responsibilities, which is, his hotel and the fortune and the family business and all that drama. So yeah, I'd completely forgotten about Eva, who's played by the same girl who was in Harry Potter. I think her name is Clemence Posey. I think that's her name.
Oh, you mean the one who played Fleur de la Cour?
Yes.
I don't remember her name, but I remember the actress you're talking about. And I had forgotten the Eva storyline too till you just said it right now.
Right?
Yikes.
There's so much that happens. And so Eva comes, and Eva is like I said, she's extremely perfect. She, helps puppies and sings to the birds, Cinderella style.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Doesn't her character also suffer a brutal assassination at the hands of the writers later?
No, in fact, she's just smart. Honestly, Blair goes, nuclear, and essentially is Blair is ring the alarm. I've been through this too long, but I'll be damned. She gonna be rocking VVS stones, and no, I'm not feeling it. Essentially, she's gonna profit everything I taught, and so I can't let you go. That's essentially what happens in a nutshell. Blair goes just full Blair, and investigates her past, and she can't come up with anything. So then, I guess when Chuck is Blair plays on Chuck's old insecurities and all of his stuff with and all the sort of his, buttons when it comes to his dad and his mom and his family. And she sort of plays on those experiences. And
I remember this.
She leaves she frames Eva. She finds Chuck's passport and stuff that like the police had originally found. And she hands it to Chuck and she says, "This is what I found in Eva's suitcase. Like, she knew who you were. Like, this was all, you know, a ploy. Like, this is your," and I think she says it, she's like, "This is your mom all over again. Like, it's just a joke." Like, and he accuses Eva and is extremely cruel to Eva. Like, and that's the thing. He had been being like really nice, and he had been being like, you know, seemingly like a changed man. And the minute Blair sort of like brings that to him, he's extremely cruel to her. And that's the thing. Like, Eva had never seen that sort of like cruelty from Chuck. Like, she doesn't know what that looks like. She's only known him as this like nice person. So she sees how extremely cruel he can be, and she's like, "You know what? Nah, I don't want it. I'm good." Like, and even when he finds out that Blair sort of like tricked him, he runs to Eva and is like, "Wait, I'm sorry, wait." And she's like, "No, please." Like, that.
Yeah.
This is
I remember that storyline.
And she leaves. And I remember watching it thinking, yeah, that girl's smart. Good on her.
Yeah, I remember that storyline, and I agree that Eva is really, really smart. And I remember watching that storyline and like really hating Blair, because Blair and Chuck had done a lot to each other, but she had never been Chuck. And what I mean is, it's so like Chuck to have done to a potential love interest of Blair's what she did with Eva. And in all the seasons since they'd been together, Blair had been like constantly building Chuck up and assuring him that he was good enough for XYZ, good enough for her. And when she saw him with this woman who was such a positive influence on him, and he really was like a changed man, you guys, he wasn't just putting on a front for Eva, she realized that the Chuck who loves her is the most toxic version of him, and she would rather have that toxicity if it means having that man. And then she proceeds to basically pull a Chuck and tear him down to bring him back to her. And it is so disgusting. It's really ugly to watch. And I'm glad that Eva left and that Louis was driven away, and I hope they find each other and get married, because fuck these hoes. That was the episode when I realized that Blair really isn't too good for Chuck.
Oh, I just remember thinking like so in the rewatch of it, I was like, wow, that's ugly. But I was also like, like, I get it. Like, like I said, like, right? Because it's definitely like that ring the alarm like moment for her. Because and I guess like for her character, to me, it made sense, because I understand, I could mentally get with the idea that like of Blair like working as hard as she worked and sacrificing as much as she sacrificed and doing as much as she did, because she did a lot and for a long time, and then sort of just seeing like, and then this other person comes along and it's like, without even trying, they sort of like get all these qualities that you taught and were trying to get and trying to like instill in this person. Listen, Blair was not about to be a starter wife. Like, she could never be like a starter wife. Like, she just doesn't have the mental and emotional capacity for it. And so like, while it was ugly, I understood it, and I felt like it tracked for who she is as a person.
I get why she did what she did. I'm definitely in agreement with all the points you just made about why she did it. I just think that it's trash that she, in fact, did do it. And I think that was the time when I stopped rooting for her to do better, I'm just like, whatever happens, happens. Because clearly, as much as trash Chuck has hurt her, she knows that's a person he needs to be if he's going to stay with her. And she would rather have him be trash with her than have him be a decent person without her. all of her desires for him are innately selfish, so have at it. I just stopped giving a fuck at that point.
Right. But you know what? But then there's growth. And I guess like that's a testament to maybe like the show, because like there's growth later on in the season, because during the Raina plot, when Raina comes in later in the season around episode 13, 14, not 13, when Raina comes in episode 12, and then Chuck legitimately is into Raina, Blair just sort of internalizes. And once Blair realizes that Chuck is legitimately into Raina, she just internalizes. And she because lets it go.
She couldn't do with Raina what she did with Eva. Like, let's not pretend what she did with Eva wasn't possible directly because Eva was poor and Eva was a sex worker. She can't do that with Raina. You know, you're fucking with the big dog. What she did with Eva, she couldn't have done with any other rich girl. She had to just sit there and eat her fucking food. Period. And just watch him flourish with this girl.
And I mean, but like she could have though, right? Because Raina ultimately dumps Chuck for Nate, for one, because Nate is the greatest. Like, you guys, Nate is so pure. If I don't say that enough. Like,
he's wonderful.
Let me tell you something. So before Chuck comes back in season 4, there's like an episode where when we're introduced to Juliet and that dumb storyline that I'm not even going to acknowledge. We're introduced to Juliet, like, so the whole thing is like Nate takes like essentially like his jump off of the night, like his like, you know, the girl he hooked up with the night before. There's like this super expensive like restaurant that he takes her to that's like really, really nice, and it's like apparently like a brunch spot for like, you know, who's who of like New York. And Juliet's, and the girl is like on the phone and like, you know, she's popping her gum and she's like, shut up. Oh my God, like, shut up. And Nate's just like sort of texting on his phone while she's on her phone. And Juliet's just looking at the girl and looking at Nate, and then looking at the girl and looking at Nate. It's a great bit. And Nate just sort of shrugs like, what are you going to do? And Juliet sort of like rolls her eyes, and then the girl gets up and walks away really quick. And then the scene, and then they start talking, and Juliet's like, you brought her here? Like, really? He goes, you know, she did a lot for me last night. Why wouldn't I take her out, treat her to some good breakfast, get her some good food, like make sure she's good, and then send her on her way? And I'm like, a lot of y'all need to get on Nate's level, like, for real.
They really do. And, like, I can't stress this enough. Like, Nate is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a perfect person, but he's a good person. And I don't just mean in comparison to the trash-ass people on this show, just, like, in life. Nate is a good person.
Right? Nate is, like, if I had to, like, Nate is the person, like, that you want on your side. Because he's, like, Nate can be reasoned with. Like, he doesn't have a lot in there, but like he has some, and like it's, his moral compass is turned to north. Like, you know what I mean? It's like,
and he just really cares about people. He just really cares about people. So some of the minor plots in like season 4 are like Blair and Serena start at Columbia because, you know, season prior, Serena was doing her white girl finding myself strict, and Blair was at NYU with Dan. Dan becomes a father for a short period of time when Georgina, resident bad girl, returns with a son in tow and tells him that he's the daddy. That doesn't last for very long, though. And Lily Vanderwoodson, Serena and Eric's mom, is on house arrest. I had forgotten that storyline entirely.
Right.
They also get a cousin, quote unquote, Charlie Rhodes, who might not be who she says she is. Turns out she's not their cousin at all.
Right. That Lily being on house arrest plot is connected to this larger, dumber plot with like Juliet and this person named Ben that we've like never heard of in our whole lives. But apparently he's a professor that Serena used to hook up with when she was in high school. So
Serena did a lot of things when she was in high school. Remember that time her and Georgina, like, weren't they with this guy and he overdosed? In, like, season one?
That's season one. That's the whole vague sort of thing for season one.
I don't know why she needed a gap year to find herself when she'd been finding herself all over the Upper East Side. But, you know, go off, Serena. Be fake deep in season 3. But anyway, season 4, she's at Columbia. And it's interesting because, like, her and Blair have, like, this class they're trying to get into. And Blair, because why wouldn't you trust your best friend, right? Tells Serena what she's going to do to impress this professor. And then Serena, because she's stupid, you guys. Like, she's never been coded as a smart person. Like, Blair or Dan, like, she's literally someone who's been coasting off of good looks and money in her family name. She literally jacks what Blair was going to say and takes the last spot in the class. And then she's just like, B, I'm not smart like you. I had no choice but to steal.
Yeah, that's sort of her. And it's weird because, like, season 4, and which is how it just shows, like, the weirdness and the lameness of Serena. Because season 4, like, you have this sort of then, like, desire. You see Serena really start to have this desire to want to be, like, more. But then she doesn't want to put in the work to be more. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, she just wants to go to, like, the Damon Salvatore School of Betterment. Or the Klaus Michelson School of Refinement.
So real. So if you had to so season 4, good, bad, or basic?
That shit was basic, fam. I'm sorry.
It was just basic. Like, there are moments, like, listen, there are moments, like, the Raina Thorpe plotline, I think, has its moment. The time that Tika Sumpter is sort of in this show is fun. 1, to see a Black person, that was fun. And then 2, she gets, like, a significant storyline with, like, her and, like, Chuck and, like, Nate and her dad. And it's a lot of drama, and it's significant. So that's cool. And I think the Louis, I think the moments of Louis and Blair are fun to watch, and they're significant. And then also this Dan Blair romance that's building, that starts to now really, like, build in season 4 is also really nice to watch.
That we do get, like, the first inklings of the Blair Dan romance, and I wasn't fucking with it at first, but, like, I very quickly got on board. Probably because they're the best actors on the show.
Right, like, same. I got very on board very quick. I was like, ooh, I think I like this. Like, and I love Dan sort of, like, really, like, I think longing for her. If I had to pick some iconic episodes or must-see episodes of season 4, I'm absolutely going to go with the season openers, the Paris episodes. Belles du Jour and Double Identity. Episode 4, A Touch of Ava. Episode 11, The Townie, because we get, like, a lot of Dan and Blair, and that starts to build up. Episode 12, The Kids Are Not All Right. Episode 14, episode 15, episode 16. Those are Raina's big episodes. And that's Panic Roommate. It happened one night while you weren't sleeping. And then episode 19, Pretty in Pink. And then episode 20, The Princess and the Frog. Mm-hmm. And then, one more. And then episode 21, Shattered Bass. And then episode 22, The Wrong Goodbye. And The Princess and the Frog is that horrible, like, episode that, like, Chuck is, like, almost, like, is, like, extremely violent with her. Or, like, has this, like, really violent episode that is, like, so horrifying to watch. But anyway, season 5.
Wait, before we get to season 5, I just have to say this one thing, and it's really shady, but just allow it, you guys. Georgina Sparks, played by Michelle Trachtenberg, is a character that really shouldn't have been written in Gossip Girl if the writing had been stronger. We use Georgina as a means of making Serena seem not that bad, and then later engendering sympathy for her. And then, like, when we need a wrench thrown in our plans, you know, again, enter Georgina with a baby for Dan. Things like this. Michelle Trachtenberg, if you're out there, sis, you deserve better than to be the character who really should never have been there. And I'm talking about both Georgina and Dawn on Buffy. These characters should have never existed. You deserve better. I'm rooting for you, and I know you have what it takes. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, they sort of use Georgina as like a deus ex machina, like a sort of person, like consistently. And it's weird because the only reason why she works in season 1 is because there's this large, like, she is used. It's not even her as a character. It's the plot is this bigger sort of plot that is building to this culmination of, you know, Serena. She's just part of this more like of this like mystery of what was this bad thing that Serena did. But as like a character, she's just like, she's sort of just like whatever. And I guess she's like, I guess like we're supposed to think she's shocking because like she does things like, because she's like so open about doing coke and like she's so open about like drugging Serena. But like you have like a literal rapist on the show. Like he keeps trying to rape people. But so I don't know. So it doesn't feel
right.
Like,
and just because she's openly doing this, isn't Serena just like doing this like non-disclosing? Like she's doing the same shit, right?
Yeah, Serena's doing the same. She's just not doing it as openly. Yeah, she does. She's essentially, Georgina stops working because the show in general ups the ante of like what all these kids are doing. Because in that first season, everyone's like drinks freely. Everyone is like social drinking. But in terms of like doing like hard drugs and like doing like stuff that's like dangerous, like drugging people, the show stays away from until like those ending episodes, like that back half of that first season. And when I say dangerous, I mean like in terms of like substance abuse. Obviously Chuck is dangerous, but so then once the show sort of like opens the gate on that, it's sort of like we know Blair, like that's not what Blair does, it's not really what Dan does, but like it's always implied that's what Chuck and Nate do. Or, well, no, it's implied that's what Chuck does. Nate doesn't really do hard drugs. Like, and that's why. But then, like, yeah, like I said, once it happens, like, there's no need for her character anymore. Like, it.
Yeah, I mean, Michelle Trachtenberg is a good actress. She's been in, like, lots of indie films. Well, not lots, but a number of which I've seen. You know, she'll always have my heart for being in Nickelodeon's very first movie, Harriet the Spy. And you can do better, sis. You can do better than these roles. And I'm rooting for you. And like, she's still like really, really beautiful still. Like, you can do this. Anyway, let's jump into season 5.
Yes, season 5 picks up where like Blair is now like completely engaged to Louis. And she has spent the summer, I guess, like in Monaco. Serena went to Los Angeles. And of course, like while she was in LA, she like fell into oh my God, she just like fell into an assistant's job, which like if you are like in the LA system and know like anything about LA, like that's actually a really, really hard job to get, being like an assistant to someone important, because it usually like means you're like on the way to like doing other important things. And she just sort of falls into it because of course she does. And Chuck and Nate are also in Los Angeles, kind of hanging out. There's this dumb plot, and it will be dumb from throughout the entirety of the season, of like Chuck trying to feel something because he doesn't feel anything for Blair anymore now that she's engaged or whatever, or doesn't have feelings. Oh my God, it's so dumb. I hate it. And that's sort of like where we're at. And then Vanessa published Dan's book that Dan was intending to never publish.
Yeah, Vanessa is a character who, she's almost like a manic pixie dream girl light. You know, she is shown as having her own goals and ambitions, but they're never expounded upon. She really just always shows up when Dan needs direction in his life, and it's really irritating.
She shows up when Dan needs direction, and then when they need somebody to like blame for something.
Well, yeah, she and Georgina take turns with that. And then later on, she falls very much into the role of like the helpmate when we are introduced to Charlie/Ivy. Then she becomes the troublemaker. And then Vanessa can very much like slip into this role of being, Dan's like, I don't know, like Dan's conscience, Dan's support team, Dan's one-woman cheerleading team. It's exasperating. And I feel like it's just not necessary, because like the show has already worked. I think the show's already established from season 1 that Dan is a thoughtful person within and of himself. Yes, it does.
Like, to an almost annoyingly degree, Dan is an extremely thoughtful person within and of himself. So the fact that Vanessa is always coming in to fulfill that role for him is strange and off. Like, it worked, I think, when she was that for Nate, like in season 2, some parts of season 3-ish, but it's clear like that they just don't know what to do with her.
Yeah, I mean, her character borrows a little bit from Manic Pixie Dream Girl trope, and it borrows a little bit from like Magical Negro trope, and it borrows a little bit from like the Mammy/Handmaiden trope, and like she legit just exists as to further Dan's plot, and I'm just like, okay, I don't even look forward to seeing Vanessa. I'm sorry. This is how I feel. I don't look forward to seeing Vanessa. But yeah, his book gets published. Blair gets pregnant with Louis' baby, miscarries. They get married anyway. They divorce, and then her and Dan embark on this full-blown affair. And honestly, I was 100% here for that affair. I was 100% here for things ending with Louis, even though they assassinated his character in a way that I didn't like, in a way to basically justify the fact that, as Louis had mentioned in the last season, Blair doesn't understand happiness and doesn't want it. And instead of coding her that way, the show just shows us that she has quote unquote legit reasons for leaving Louis. And so she embarks on this affair with Dan. It's hot, you guys. They have a chemistry that she has good chemistry with Chuck. I'll be honest, but Dan and Serena didn't have that chemistry, in my opinion.
I think it's funny. I don't know that I would categorize like Chuck and Blair's, like, not Chuck and Blair, yikes, Dan and Blair's chemistry is like hot, but I do think the way it's done is like very romantic. And I am very like much swept away in them. And I don't know why. And I think it's annoying. Because I know at the time when it happened, fans were like really against it. I know I was against it at first. I was not sure how this was all going to shake out. Fans were like really vocal against it. And it shows that like the show just didn't have the like cojones to like go through with it, because there's a episode where like they code them as being like, but you know what? I guess in hindsight, maybe I really like that they coded it this way. I think there's an episode where they code like Dan and Blair's like not being like really like sexually compatible, but I think I like that in hindsight because I think it reinforces that their relationship is real, like it's really real, and not even they're not sexually compatible. It just like takes a while for like them to figure out like what their like groove is in that way. But I think that's very realistic, and I think I like that actually.
Yeah. So for me, it kind of reminded me of how Seth and Summer's relationship was initially coded in the OC when they first started having sex, and they had like a string of really bad sexual encounters before things like picked up. And I thought that was honest because he'd only ever been with like two people before, like Serena, and like one night with Vanessa, or a couple nights with Vanessa, and she'd only ever been with Chuck. So, like you said, it's realistic and it's honest that they needed to find like their rhythm with each other. And, while it didn't have the steam of her relationship with Chuck, I thought that their chemistry was hotter because it was romantic, which I'm a big fan of. Sex without romance for me is like, what's the point? Why are we here? Which is like a very like old school frame of thought. It's just who I am as a person.
All right. Fair.
So like when I see, especially like you said, they'd been teasing this out since season 4. I love a good build-up, you guys. I really love a good build-up. I think sexual tension does so much for characters, especially when the actors can act. They are acting, like Leighton Meester. Yes, capital A, acting with a hard G, like Leighton Meester and Penn Badgley were. It does so much to really make it shine on screen. And I think sexual tension does a lot to, it's a great trampoline for characters to bounce off of. And that relationship put Blair back in my good graces.
Right. So at the beginning of season 5, you sort of have Blair is ego prego, and she's getting married to Louis, and we really see this this friendship between Dan and Blair like further flourish. Well, friendship turning into, on Blair's side it's definitely friendship. On Dan's side it's definitely more, but he's, for the sake of her. And this is why Dan works. For the sake of her, he keeps it in, right? Like he realizes, Dan respects that she's getting married, respects that like she has complicated feelings towards Chuck. And although he feels more, he doesn't act on it, and he really makes it his priority to be a good friend to her, because that's what she needs as a friend. And that's why Dan is so awesome.
Right, and this is why I'm about to roast the fuck out of Dawson when we do Dawson's Creek next week. Proceed.
He's a really good friend to her, because Blair is somebody who is a big lover of like denial and copes via denial, and she can be her own worst enemy at times, and Dan is very much her partner in trying to save her from all of that. So much so that like before the book gets published, Dan writes, I think, an essay that's supposed to be in the New Yorker about that. That's a chapter from the book, and it's about, Dylan, Hunter, and Claire. And he goes to Louis to like get it killed, because he realizes like that's not going to be good for their relationship, and it's not going to help anything. And he sacrifices on her behalf, and I love it, because it's just so what Blair needs. I also want to bring up really quick, we have Louis' sister, who comes and tries to break up Blair and Louis. And she tries to do it by showing or setting up these events that will show that like Blair is unfit to be a princess. And one of the things that she does is like she throws Blair this like bachelorette party. And I think this is like post baby or whatever, because they throw it and it happens. And while Blair is like drunk off her ass, people are always, because people always say like you tell the truth when you're drunk. It's like the poor man's true serum. While Blair is like drunk off her ass, she, like, Beatrice is sort of like, why are you marrying my brother when I know you don't love him? And she's, obviously referencing Chuck. And Blair says something that is so real, that like is the realest shit the realest shit that the show has ever like come out with. And Blair says, I do love Louis, like I love him. And Beatrice is like, but you love Chuck more. And she goes, and Blair's like, listen, I can't choose who I love, but I can choose how I love them. And she's like, and the fact is, and I was like, damn, like that's real as fuck. Like that's real. A lot of y'all need to get on that. You can't choose, but you can choose how you love somebody. And she sort of being like, Blair realizes that situation isn't for her anymore. And she's like, nah, like I can't keep messing with it. And it's a great moment. It's a great moment. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I agree with that. So also in the season, it does something that's very soap opera-esque by bringing Bart Bass, Chuck's presumably dead father, back from the dead. Turns out that Bart Bass was never dead and he was just biding his time like the fucking shark he is. So that happens in season 5, and it was like, so he's like the obstacle that Chuck deals with, because he realizes very quickly that these years that his father's been dead, not a damn thing has changed, and he's still not going to get this man's support, and they're still going to be at loggerheads. So that becomes the whole thing, and we see Chuck threatening. Chuck is on the precipice of becoming the person he was in season 1 while warring with his father. So that was an interesting plot line for sure.
I hated that. Like, I just hated that they brought him back from the dead. It's just one of my least favorite things.
What purpose did that serve? I just want to know.
Same. Like, I'm just like, it didn't. I was like, what's the point? Like, what did it serve? Like, how did it grow? Like, it felt like,
did you get the bigger house? Did you get did you get the part? Like, why are we here? How did we get here? I felt it's reeked of desperation to me. That's all I'm going to say.
No, it did. It reeked of desperation on the writer's part. Like, they didn't know what else. And that's real. Like, it's like, what else is Chuck? But, like, that's it. He's nothing else. I think they just realized his, character was shallow and, like, finally. And then they had just run out of stuff. Because, like, Blair is no longer in his orbit. His dad is no longer in his orbit. So what do we do now with this sort of, I guess, fan favorite character? And they couldn't think of anything, which is just anyway, it was dumb. It was boring. Nate sleeping with Elizabeth Hurley.
Yeah, the character is definitely played by Elizabeth Hurley, who is an older woman who works at The Spectator, the newspaper that he works for. Charlie, whose real name is Ivy, is also working there. Her identity is revealed to be Ivy later in this season, and she's fucking none other than Dr. Vander Woodson, Serena and Eric's dad.
Right. Ew. Like
That
Charlie goes through a lot of people. Because I think, like in season 6 or later in the season, she'll like start having sex with Rufus. I don't know. It's really weird.
Yeah, actually. And here's the thing, like her fucking Rufus was a retroactive assassination on the Rufus character. The Rufus character is not someone who cheats. He's not even capable of sleeping with someone he's not in love with, and he's not into younger women. But they made him all of these things in as a means of driving that wedge between them, getting the Vander Woodsons back together, and therefore clearing the path for Serena and Dan to eventually end up back together so that they wouldn't be step siblings. Like, you're doing a lot.
Yeah, it's just it's a lot, and it doesn't. It's a lot, and it doesn't do anything, and
it doesn't slap you guys.
It doesn't slap you guys. And it's weird because like Ivy jumps to Nate, and then she, I don't know, whatever. It's also whatever.
That's the other thing. Like, Nate is such a good person that like it's very, very common in this show for really shitty people to just find their own way out of his lives. He doesn't even have to kick them out. Like, the trash takes itself out when it comes to Nate Archibald, and I'm here for it.
Right. Nate is like the only, listen, that's why like Nate really is like the only pure person from like beginning to end. Anyway.
What do we think of season 5? Good, bad, or basic? I thought that season 5 was on the cusp of being good, and it would have been if the things that they were setting us up for were the things that had happened. Like, I wanted Rufus and Lily to stay together. I wanted Blair and Dan to stay together. I wanted Chuck to get his shit together and build his empire and just be fucking single. I wanted Serena to get her shit together and just be fucking single. I wanted Jenny Humphrey to be vindicated. Why the fuck was Billy Baldwin invited? Who invited him? Like,
he'd been around since season 4, I think, as like their dad.
Right, but in this season later on, he starts sleeping with Charlie, who's really Ivy, and that becomes like a whole thing. And I think then Rufus sleeps with her. It's a whole thing. It's a clusterfuck. It's really, really, really bad. It's so Dynasty meets Days of Our Lives. I'm over it. I think season 5 was just really bad.
Right. So, and the thing about season 5 that's annoying is like, it's like you said, like they're getting this last season 6. It's barely a season. It's 8 episodes. And the show is essentially like rushing to put everybody back at like a sort of like 1 or like, 0, in order to essentially like fan service for the last season, which is annoying because something that was strong about the OC is that Gossip Girl doesn't do, or that I think Gossip Girl attempts to do but fails, is that the OC like really just did what it wanted in terms of like how these stories developed, and it resolves ultimately at the end in a way that like you would not have thought it would have resolved. So like on the OC, Ryan goes to college by himself, and Marissa's dead, and Seth and Summer end up together, but then Sandy and Kirsten leave Newport, and that all feels, and when you watch it, and Taylor goes on to be, Taylor, and when you watch it all in its entirety, like that ending feels right, because it just feels like the natural progression of the story. And I guess Gossip Girl doesn't do that. It works to try to resolve these stories in the way that the fans, I guess, would have quote unquote wanted. So Chuck and Blair get married, which is horrific. And Dan and Serena end up together, which is dumb. And Lily and Rufus are separate, are divorced, but I guess are happy with other people, which actually feels right to me. But
yeah, she and Dr. Vander Woodson are back together again. Dan and Serena are getting married. It's a lot. Like, here's the thing. I was never, like, rooting for Lily and Rufus in that way, so that didn't bother me. What bothered me is how the Billy Baldwin character is now being rebranded. The way that Chuck was rebranded, and all these men go through these rebrands, and it's like, let's resuscitate all the ancient daddies, Bart Bass, Dr. Vander Woodson, just throw them back on the show for no fucking reason whatsoever, just to stir the pot, because it's easier than writing drama and internal conflict in the characters we've already established. So in season 6, that's what happens. Blair and Chuck get married, and they get married in a fashion that is so typical of their relationship, when they say their I do's literally by the skin of their teeth before the law comes down on Chuck, which is so, like, it's just quintessential of their relationship thus far. And it's almost like a foreshadow that she's going to be putting up with his shit for the rest of her life.
Right. And then,
so, yeah.
Oh, and they assassinate Nate's character, and they have Nate sleeping with a high schooler, which I don't even acknowledge, to be kind of honest.
Yeah, again, why was that even necessary?
Why was it necessary? Why is that a thing? Make it stop. It's horrible. Nate would never do that. Ugh.
I mean, Chuck Bass, of everyone on the show, and Dr. Vander Woodson, to be honest, would be the most likely to do that. But I think the biggest character assassination is actually the character of Dan Humphrey, who in season 6 is revealed to be Gossip Girl. Yeah, I could have kept Gossip Girl a fucking mystery, because right now that's the last thing we care about. But making Dan Gossip Girl retroactively makes him a piece of shit.
But also, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it does not make any sense from, like, a narrative, like, point. Like, nowhere.
Like, we acknowledge it doesn't make any sense. But I'm talking about, like, it doesn't make any sense, but they did it. Okay? They did it. There's, like, no getting around the fact that it was done. The fact that it was done makes Dan retroactively shitty. He's a person with no loyalties, with no compunction, with no sense of discretion whatsoever. He's put everybody on blast, including his own baby sister. So, yeah, doing this is the worst thing they could have done to Dan as a character.
Because if they're like, oh, Dan is Gossip Girl, that means, like, Dan, like, publicly commented on, like, the status of his little sister's virginity, which is, like, what? That doesn't make any, that's gross. That doesn't track with, like, anything we've ever known about him as a character. It doesn't track with anything they've, like, set up for the past season, like previous seasons. It is exactly what it feels like, which is right. That they put, like, all the cast photos on a wall, and they played darts, and whoever the dart landed on, they were just like, okay, that'll be Gossip Girl. Like,
right.
That's exactly what it feels like.
Here's the thing. Making any member of the main cast Gossip Girl was bullshit. If you had to make a member of the main cast Gossip Girl, well, not main, but, like, it's a character on the outskirts, I would have made it either Serena's younger brother Eric or Georgina Sparks. Making it one of the main cast makes no fucking sense, especially it being Dan Humphrey, because Dan Humphrey is someone that a lot of people trusted with their secrets. So the fact that he's Gossip Girl makes him a shit person. But from a sensical, logical point of view, as Alex said, it makes no sense because he's literally there in the room surrounded by people when they're getting these Gossip Girl blasts. Does he have a double? Does he have a fucking clone?
I guess like maybe he like put it on a timer, but like, come on, like, no, it just doesn't make any sense.
He'd have to be psychic for that to work because Gossip Girl was like, putting shit out the moment it dropped.
Like,
like,
it would, in fact, like, it would probably, and I would have liked it more if like if it had been like one of Blair's minions or something. Like, if that was Gossip Girl, I'd be like, oh, that's funny. Like, or something. Like, if they had like a minion that like was with Blair all through like high school and then continued with her at Columbia, and then like we always just sort of saw this person around the way we sort of see Blair's minions around. If that had been it, I'd have been like, okay, that's funny. Like,
yeah, I could have fucked with that. And like I said, I could have fucked with
it being Dorota.
No, I couldn't have fucked with it being Dorota because that would mean that Dorota betrayed Blair, and she's like the one person Blair completely trusts.
Oh, that's fair.
Right. So I could fuck with it being one of Blair's minions if they had built up this character, someone who was always around, like Alex said. I could have fucked with it being Eric Vander Woodson, who had a lot of time on his hands every time he had to go to rehab for suicidal thoughts and depression. I could have fucked with it being Georgina Sparks. And if it had to be a member of the main cast, I could have actually fucked with it being Serena, because she is a type of character that you can very easily code as wanting any attention, even negative attention. And she's kind of a shitty friend, so it's sort of believable.
Right. And then when Serena does take over, because there is this like small plot in season 5 when Serena, like where Georgina, I guess Gossip Girl has lost her laptop. Which even just the beginnings of this is dumb, but like Gossip Girl has lost her laptop and Georgina is Gossip Girl for a period. And then Georgina hands Serena Gossip Girl's laptop, and then Serena is Gossip Girl for a period. And but even just bringing Gossip Girl into the real, into, I think, the narrative, into the narrative as like an actual person versus just letting her like stay this like random omniscient voice is dumb, because I think the stronger and like everybody shows up, like everybody from like the principal cast and like the supporting cast and people that like even like the minions, like everybody shows up to this bar, and then they all get this blast they all get a Gossip Girl blast on their phone, and it says and Gossip Girl says like you said you were looking for Gossip Girl, well, look around, this is it. And that I thought was like really smart, really great, and like I think it said a lot about like just how we live in a time where like that's real. Like Gossip Girl's like, look around, you are all Gossip Girl because I couldn't do any of this without you, because you're the ones that are always sending me tips, you are the ones that are like ratting on each other, right? Because that was a thing that like people could send Gossip Girl tips and photos and stuff, and like all she does is just post. All she does is like fact check and post. So
right. So they're like the paparazzi.
Right. And so I liked that idea, because I do think it's very like it's a significant idea of like the time that we live in terms of like there is nowhere that like you can hide really, because as long as somebody has like a phone in their hand, like you're being watched. And like and there is like this undercurrent about like, you know, surveillance culture. That was interesting. It's like it's a small sliver of brilliance, and then the show just goes back on it, and I'm like, why? You like, it was so smart. Like, why couldn't you just be smart for once?
Right. They really didn't need to show, like, this is not Pretty Little Liars where we are invested in who A is, because this is a person who's like out here killing folks, manipulating folks, blackmailing folks, extorting folks. It's not the same. It's not the same. We don't need to know who Gossip Girl is.
And the biggest difference the biggest difference between like I think a Pretty Little Liars like an A and a Gossip, or like the biggest difference between like an A and a Gossip Girl is like, you know, we see A, right? Like those like at the in the end credits, those black gloved hands come out and, you know, set up like a new sort of like toy or like cut off a doll head or something, you know, creepy, right? So like you've already, so by like even just the act of like putting these sort of like bodiless hands into like a frame and have a visual of somebody actively doing something, I think is way more significant than just like this voice, this nonsensical voice that like hasn't said like a real sentence in like 3 or 4 seasons.
Right. And it's not even bodiless hands. We see A moving like their entire body. They're dressed all in black. They're wearing the gloves. They're wearing like a black cap that covers everything. And we see them moving like we see them in an entire room. We see them looking at a board of pictures of these girls. We see them opening the door to this cabin and who the fuck knows where. We see them like sitting in a car across the street watching them. Like A is not a group delusion, and they're certainly not sending out this information for A to know. A is someone watching them. A is someone stalking them. Even if A literally did nothing else but stalk them, A is a real fucking problem in a way that Gossip Girl could never be. We don't need to know who Gossip Girl is. These hoes can't shut the fuck up about their personal lives. They are Gossip Girl.
Right. Like they're Gossip Girl. And in fact, it reminds me of like watching Gossip Girl and like watching them use Gossip Girl, like, and how they send tips in and like how people sort of like inform on each other. I'm sort of like, damn, this is like what the Kardashians do. Like
high key, yes.
High key. I was like, so this is like a day in the life of Kris Jenner. Interesting. I'm fascinated.
Like, listen, it's the truth though. It's the truth though. And it's not even like informing on themselves, right? They do the thing where like they hate Gossip Girl until they have some tea to spill on someone else, and they'll be the first one to run and snitch.
Right. They'll be the first to snitch.
Like, you hated her yesterday when she was putting your shit on blast, but now it's time for someone else's shit to get exposed. You can't text fast enough.
Like, exactly. When Blair, like the first time that Blair really pisses Chuck off, and he's like, and she's like, oh, I'm done with you. Like, I mean, the way his fingers fly over that keyboard to tell Gossip Girl that she's been fucking him and Nate, like, oh my God.
Right. You know? So I'm like, Gossip Girl's not this seemingly omniscient stalker presence that A was, because A was a person who had assembled the team, which was really, really smart, first of all, to show us why A is everywhere at once. But A was also really, really calculating and really, really intelligent in a way that A set up surveillance on these girls in the least expected people and in the least expected places in a way that Gossip Girl never did. Like, Gossip Girl was never this omnipresent, omniscient being. Y'all told her everything.
Right, y'all. So why? Why do I, like, don't...
We don't need to know.
I don't need to know. I don't care. Like, shut up. Like, I get that, like, fans, like, I get that there were, like, a subset of vocal fans that were like, who is Gossip Girl? But, like, don't listen to them. They're dumb. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
I mean this from the bottom of my fucking heart. Like, the very bottom, the deepest depths of my soul, you guys. Fuck the fans. Like, listen, you're not running this show. Like, I get it when we're talking about real issues of character development, plot, pasting, the way queer characters or characters of color are treated. These are valid critiques. You are not owed the closure that you think you're owed on these shows. You're lucky that shit lasted more than one season. I'm still grieving my so-called life getting canceled after season 1. You're not owed the closure that you think you're owed. You're not owed the answers that you think you're owed. And sometimes leaving those holes and leaving those loose threads can be a point of intrigue that gives a show a level of sophistication that it needs. And this show desperately needed that. And these whiny ass fans and these spineless writers took that away from it.
Right. And listen, I think it's just like it's like art in the time of Twitter. And I get it. I get that it's hard, and I get that it's hard because your show is dependent upon your show getting another season or getting more runs or being interesting is dependent on you, but it's also dependent on fan reception. And if people stop watching, well, then that's your show. You're getting canceled. It's over. But you've got to, as a creator, you've got to understand how to filter the bad notes and how to filter the bad fans. You just have to. And because bad fans are a thing. We've talked about this, how you have fans, but you have these people who ship Spike and Buffy thinking that's the wave, when good God well it isn't. You, as a creator, you've got to really have a strong sense of knowing your vision, knowing what you want, and being able to filter all and filter the bad, and know what's good crit and what's bad crit from a public sphere, because there are good criticisms that come from the public sphere, right? Listen, the person who is a master at this is Beyonce. Low-key, Beyonce is really good at because Beyonce doesn't inherit, and this is something that House Mubba has on Twitter. He said Beyonce doesn't innately think that every criticism is an attack on her, and what she's excellent at doing is filtering all the shit that's hateration and then getting to the shit that makes sense. So
right. And like Alex said, a lot of criticism is valid. I've mentioned what type: plot, pacing, character usage, issues with any internalized or overt biases like queerphobia or passive racism. But we did not need to know who Gossip Girl was. And here's where the show fucked up. By telling us who Gossip Girl was, they gave us absolutely no reason to ever rewatch the show. Oh. Because if we did know who Gossip Girl was, it's a show you could watch again and again and just spin out tons of different theories about who Gossip Girl might be, as we did when we, put our little rewrites on it. This would be a good Gossip Girl. This person would be a good Gossip Girl. You solved all the mystery in a show that was a clusterfuck from pretty much the first season through the 6th season, and just big upped a lot of toxic relationships. What else is there? Why am I here?
Right. There just needed to be, I think what Gossip Girl essentially, I think a big part of what Gossip Girl lost in its run is that I don't know that the show ever got what is this show really about, in a big thematic way. Of course it's about these group of rich kids, and they're doing all this stuff, and all this stuff is happening, but what is the show really about? Because I just didn't think the show ever got a big handle on its themes, whereas I feel like the OC did. I think the OC had a lot to say about class and the nature of class, and how stratified class is, and how, like, I think and how completely, like, your life can change just by the presence or the lack or the absence of money. And Gossip Girl just never, and I think OC had a lot to say about family and trauma, and how like the different ways trauma like sticks with us even when we think it's gone. I think OC had a lot to say about like healing, and I never, and that's, I think, one of the biggest things in this rewatch. I never really got what Gossip Girl was like trying to say, you know?
I agree with that. But for me, I thought that was the point of Gossip Girl, that it was the antithesis of a show like the OC. In the first review, I talked about how this show was kind of like a love letter to the Upper East Side in the way that the OC was a love letter to California. Now, traditionally, New York has been seen as this cultural, intellectual epicenter, and like California is just this shallow, sunny place where beach bums and failed actresses go to die. And with the OC and Gossip Girl, Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage subverted that. They made, Newport Beach this place, this deep intellectual hub where people cared about family and community and accountability. And on Gossip Girl, it was a place where people threw their money around. They flaunted their class privilege. They really didn't care about anything but getting on and being seen by the right people and being in the right places. Accountability, what's that? Forgiveness, what's that? Family, barely. And it was really, really interesting to see them not go to this stereotypical view of New York and this very stereotypical view of Southern California, because it would have been so easy to put the characters of Gossip Girl in Newport Beach and put the characters of the OC in New York.
Right.
But at the end of the day, Gossip Girl is a teen drama. It's not a mystery. Gossip Girl was not a mystery that needed to be solved. No.
Right.
like, stop. Please stop. So season 6 was beyond basic. Like, basic to the infinity, exponential.
Yeah, it was. It's bad. I would categorize it as like definitively bad. I don't even think personally there are episodes like worth watching from it. Like, I think you should watch the series finale. I think just for the sake of it, but I don't think there's anything in there that's like must see beyond the season finale.
Yeah, I agree, except I include the season finale. The season finale for me was a nail in the coffin that just cemented all of these poor writing decisions that had preceded it. So I wasn't even trying to see the finale, to be very honest with you.
Right. I just, it's just, it is what it is. It did things. Yeah.
We weren't always sure what it was doing, but it did something.
But it did something. Yeah, I think if you want to watch like the season opener, like that season 6, episode 1, and then just to see how everything I think really resolved from season 5, and then season 6, episode 10, New York, I Love You, XOXO. That's it. That's good. You've accomplished. You've done it.
Right. Absolutely. I agree with that. So yeah, that's all we had to say about Gossip Girl. It did things, I guess. It's there.
It's still, I would say in my mass rewatch, it's good for specific moments. Like, I think Gossip Girl is like one of those shows that like is good. Like, it does. Like, there are just moments that like really work. Like, there are just these small moments within the episodes that work. And I think if you are like a writer, I think it's good to watch Gossip Girl to like find those small moments that work and then learn from it in the sense of like really take home like, or to really meditate on like, why does this work? Why does this moment work versus this other one that doesn't? And because I think if you can nail those things, if you can sort of think through that, you can learn like a lot, and you do learn a lot, I think.
I would say that, but more for me, I think Gossip Girl succeeded because the cast was good looking, makeup and hair was always on point, they were very well dressed. And, you know, going back to something you said earlier about the Kardashians, the show debuted in 2007, and Kardashian craze was still in its, you know, like, had really taken off. The Kardashians were a household name by this point, and I absolutely think the show's showrunners and writers understood innately that poor people really, really, really like watching rich people be rich and unapologetically rich.
Right, absolutely. Gossip Girl definitely came on to that, like, still sort of, like when escapism, like, in this way was, like, something that was still valuable to like to audience. Like, I don't think you could redo Gossip Girl right now, to be honest.
With the amount of little girls who are following Kylie Jenner and Kendall Jenner on their Instagram still, I think it could be done. It would just need to be a little bit more racially diverse is all. Tweaks. Like I said, I think they need more racial diversity. And I think that they need to make like a character like Blair a little less intelligent, and a character like Serena a little bit kinder, like portray her as a better friend, make her more of an Elena type character who, you know, at least pretends to care about their friends. And it could be done. You know, these just excessively wealthy kids, I think a lot of Gen Zs would want to live vicariously through that. I don't think that generation, unfortunately, is as woke as we would want them to be. I think it could be done with some tweaks. I'll just say that. I think it could be done with a few tweaks here and there, but that excessively wealthy, engaging with an excessively wealthy cast like that, I definitely think it's something that would be a guilty pleasure for a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people might admit to how much they love Gossip Girl at first, but they would absolutely be watching it.
Well, I mean, I guess we'll see. HBO Max is on track for the revival. It'll be on HBO Max coming, I think, within the next 2 years. And I do know that they've, like, announced that there's going to be, like, I think a significant Instagram component of the new Gossip Girl. So we'll see.
All right. I want to see that. I'm not going to watch the show, but I want to see the reactions to the show.
Yeah, we'll see. Like, I think a big part of what made OG Gossip Girl work is the actors. And there you have it, folks. This is everything that made the back half of Gossip Girl good, bad, basic, and unforgettable.
Gossip Girl didn't have the best writing, pacing, or direction, but it had a pretty cast, a couple of strong actors, and just enough of the right stuff to make this work, cementing the show's legacy and place in modern pop culture.
If you haven't already, be sure to check out our patrons exclusive Gossip Girl inspired Spotify playlist and tune in next week when we'll be discussing the quintessential teen drama Dawson's Creek. Until then, look out for GBB's first ever movie review, which airs this Saturday. Em and I will be discussing the beloved coming-of-age drama Now and Then, which is currently airing streaming on Netflix. A bonus top-tier, patrons-only GBB movie reviews will deal with casting, writing, plot, pacing, cinematography, and the usage of common cinematic tropes in the films that we love.
You were talking really fast just then.
I know, because it's a big paragraph. If you haven't already, be sure to check out our patrons exclusive Gossip Girl inspired Spotify playlist. And tune in next week when we'll be discussing the quintessential teen drama Dawson's Creek. Until then, look out for GBB's first ever movie review, which airs this Saturday. Em and I will be discussing the beloved coming-of-age drama Now and Then, which is currently streaming on Netflix. A bonus for top-tier patrons only, GBB's movie reviews will deal with casting, writing, plot, pacing, cinematography, and the usage of common cinematic tropes in the films that we love.
If you want to catch up on Gossip Girl or rewatch it, the show is currently streaming on Netflix. And if you want to get ahead of our Dawson's Creek recap, Dawson's Creek is currently streaming on Hulu. Follow The Good, The Bad, The Basic pod on Spotify to listen to all of our regular weekly episodes on the go. If you love this sort of content, spread the word and become a show producer and patron on Patreon. Your support allows us to keep bringing you our regular weekly content as well as exclusive bonus material.
As always, be sure to check out our SoundCloud page, The Good, The Bad, The Basic, and of course, be sure to follow us at Good, Bad, Basic Pod on Twitter. Until next time.
XOXO.
Gossip Girl. Bye.
Bye, everyone.